4 seconds. That is the gap Lance Stroll just admitted Aston Martin needs to find. 4 full seconds to the leaders in Bahrain. Not 4 tenths. Not a minor setup tweak. 4 seconds. While Ferrari is running in the mid 1 minute 34s, the AMR26 is stuck in the high 1 minute 38s. That is not sandbagging. That is survival mode. And it gets worse. The new Honda power unit reportedly cannot even reach full revolutions on the straights. Top speeds nearly 20 km/h down on rivals. Energy deployment fading halfway down the straight. Adrian Newey's first Aston Martin concept, already forced into conservative engine modes. This is not a small setback. This is a potential structural problem at the very start of a new era. Because when your own driver publicly says you are 4 seconds off, the crisis is no longer hidden inside the garage. It is exposed. Subscribe now. Because once we break down what Stroll, Newey, and the Honda data really revealed in Bahrain, you will understand why Aston Martin might be in far deeper trouble than anyone expected. Let's slow this down, because that number changes everything. 4 seconds is not a bad lap. It is not a missed apex. It is not a conservative engine mode. 4 seconds in modern Formula 1 is a different category of problem. When Lance Stroll said the team needs to find 4 seconds to fight at the front, he did not say it casually. He said it after 2 full days of running in Bahrain. After data analysis. After comparing sector times. And that honesty is what makes this situation serious. Because teams usually hide behind testing language. Different programs. Unknown fuel loads. Engine modes turned down. But no team willingly admits a 4-second deficit unless the gap is real. Now look at the numbers. While the leaders were comfortably running in the mid 1 minute 34s, Aston Martin's best representative laps were stuck in the high 1 minute 38s. That gap cannot be explained by setup alone. It points directly toward power. And that brings us to Honda. The new RA626H power unit was supposed to mark a fresh beginning. Factory partnership. Full integration. Long-term vision. Instead, in Bahrain, it operated under heavy restriction. Reports indicate the engine could not reach full revolutions on the main straight. That is enormous. When you are limited in maximum engine speed, you are not just losing top speed. You are losing acceleration through the entire deployment phase. Speed trap data tells the same story. Aston Martin was nearly 20 km/h down on rivals at the end of the straight. 20. That is not aerodynamic drag alone. That is power being held back. And when energy deployment derates halfway down the straight, the time loss compounds. You lose on entry. You lose mid-straight. You lose before braking. It becomes brutal. But here is where it gets even more uncomfortable. Adrian Newey was brought in to design a championship platform. The AMR26 is aggressive. Extremely tight packaging. Radical bodywork. Minimal cooling openings. But aggressive packaging only works when the power unit underneath is stable. If overheating forces the engine into conservative modes, the entire aerodynamic concept suffers. And Bahrain's temperatures exposed that vulnerability immediately. Repeated engine cover removals. Extended garage time. Cautious long runs. This was not sandbagging. This was containment. Block 1 is clear. The 4-second gap is not a mystery. It is a combination of restricted power, limited deployment, and a car that cannot yet use its full potential. And that is a brutal position to be in at the very start of a new era. But the engine is only half of the nightmare. Because even if Honda unlocks power overnight, the AMR26 has deeper balance issues. Lance Stroll did not only talk about lap time. He talked about drivability. Under braking, the car feels unstable. Rear locking. Inconsistent engine braking. A brake-by-wire system that does not feel synchronized with the hybrid recovery. And when those systems are not perfectly aligned, the driver loses confidence immediately. You cannot attack corner entry. You cannot brake late. You cannot recover time in the technical sections. So even if the straight-line deficit disappears, the platform still needs refinement. Now think about what that means strategically. Adrian Newey designed this car around aggressive packaging. Tight side pods. Minimal cooling openings. Compact rear architecture. The philosophy is clear. Maximize aerodynamic efficiency. Reduce drag. Create a sharp platform for the future. But aggressive packaging leaves very little margin for thermal instability. And Bahrain exposed that instantly. Repeated cooling adjustments. Engine cover removals. Long garage sessions while rivals continued running programs smoothly. Every hour in the garage is lost correlation. Lost setup learning. Lost tire understanding. And this is where the situation becomes truly dangerous. Because testing time is limited. You cannot afford to spend it troubleshooting basic reliability. You need it to optimize performance. Right now, Aston Martin is doing the opposite. They are protecting components, running conservative modes, avoiding aggressive deployment. That means they have not even seen the real ceiling of the AMR26 yet. But here is the uncomfortable question. What if the ceiling is not much higher? What if the 4-second gap shrinks to 2 seconds once the engine is unleashed? That still leaves them outside the fight. And in a regulation reset year, falling behind early can define the entire season. Because development resources quickly shift toward the future. If Aston Martin starts the era this far back, recovery becomes exponentially harder. The dream was clear. Newey arrives. Honda partnership begins. A clean slate. A new powerhouse. Instead, Bahrain has revealed a team in containment mode. Drivers managing frustration. Engineers managing temperatures. A power unit operating below its intended capacity. And a gap measured in seconds, not tenths. That is not a minor setback. That is a structural warning. The only hope lies in calibration. If the energy recovery issue is software related, Honda can react quickly. Mapping can change overnight. Deployment curves can be optimized. Engine speed restrictions can be lifted once reliability is confirmed. But if the limitation is hardware-based, if the aggressive packaging has created a cooling bottleneck, if the hybrid system architecture itself is compromised, then this is not a quick fix. It becomes a season-long fight just to survive the midfield. And that is the fatal reality Bahrain has exposed. Aston Martin built a bold concept. But bold concepts only succeed when every component works in harmony. Right now, the AMR26 is not in harmony. It is in recovery mode. And here is where the situation becomes brutally clear. This is not just about Bahrain. This is about momentum. Because when a new regulation cycle begins, the first impression matters more than people admit. Teams do not just test performance. They test confidence. They test belief inside the garage. And right now, Aston Martin does not look like a team overflowing with confidence. Lance Stroll's words were not defensive. They were blunt. For seconds is not a motivational speech. It is an alarm. And when a driver publicly admits that kind of deficit, it sends a message internally as well. Engineers feel it. Mechanics feel it. Sponsors feel it. Now add the Newey factor. Adrian Newey does not join projects to fight for minor points. He joins to build eras. To design dominant platforms. To outthink regulation cycles. But even the greatest aerodynamic mind cannot compensate for a restricted power unit. If the Honda engine cannot run at full revolutions. If deployment continues to derate early on the straight. If cooling constraints force conservative maps. Then the entire aerodynamic philosophy becomes compromised. Because what is the point of reducing drag if you cannot fully exploit the straight? What is the benefit of tight packaging if you are overheating in desert conditions? And Bahrain is not the hottest track on the calendar. Imagine what happens in races with even higher ambient temperatures. This is where the fatal reality sharpens. Aston Martin built the AMR26 around long-term ambition. But right now, they are fighting short-term survival. They are not optimizing performance. They are stabilizing systems. That is a completely different mindset. And in Formula One, mindset matters. Because while Aston Martin diagnoses hybrid synchronization and cooling bottlenecks, Ferrari and Red Bull are refining race pace. While Honda limits revolutions to protect reliability, Mercedes is optimizing energy recovery curves. The gap does not wait politely. It widens. And here is the most uncomfortable question of all. What if this is not a temporary calibration issue? What if the 4-second deficit is the visible symptom of a deeper architectural compromise? If that is the case, then no overnight software patch will fix it. It becomes months of redesign, months of correlation work, months of chasing a moving target. And by then, the championship fight is gone. This is why Bahrain felt heavier than a normal test for Aston Martin. Because the promise was enormous. Factory backing. A legendary designer. A new power unit partnership. Instead, the first competitive glimpse revealed restrictions, instability, and a gap measured in seconds. The AMR26 is not slow because it lacks ambition. It is slow because the system around it is not yet functioning at full strength. And until that changes, the dream of immediate contention remains exactly that. A dream. And now we arrive at the crossroads that will define Aston Martin's entire season. Because there is one final layer to this story that makes everything even more fragile. Expectation. This was supposed to be the beginning of something historic. A purpose-built factory. State-of-the-art wind tunnel. A full-works Honda partnership. And Adrian Newey, the architect of multiple championship dynasties, stepping into a new challenge. The narrative was clear. Aston Martin was not building for survival. They were building for dominance. And yet, after 2 days in Bahrain, the reality looks painfully different. Instead of pushing aggressive qualifying simulations, they are managing temperatures. Instead of chasing tenths, they are protecting components. Instead of fine-tuning balance for pole position, they are diagnosing synchronization between hybrid recovery and brake-by-wire systems. That is not how a title contender begins a new era. And here is where the pressure multiplies. When you invest this heavily, when you bring in Newey, when you align with Honda for a long-term vision, the spotlight intensifies. Every weakness becomes amplified. Every slow sector becomes symbolic. Every engine cover removal becomes a headline. The 4-second deficit is not just a number. It is a signal that the integration is not complete. The chassis, the power unit, the cooling philosophy, the deployment mapping, the braking systems. They are not yet operating as one unified machine. And Formula One punishes incomplete systems relentlessly. Because while Aston Martin stabilizes, their rivals refine. While they search for missing horsepower, others search for marginal gains. And marginal gains win championships. Now imagine the psychological effect if the first race confirms Bahrain's trend. If Aston Martin qualifies near the back of the midfield. If they struggle to reach top speed on race day. If the gap remains measured in seconds, not tenths. Development priorities shift immediately. Emergency upgrades. Revised cooling layouts. Reworked energy recovery calibration. And once you enter emergency mode, you are no longer dictating your own timeline. You are reacting. That is the fatal reality Newey and Stroll have unintentionally exposed. The AMR26 is ambitious. But ambition without harmony becomes vulnerability. And in a regulation reset year, vulnerability spreads quickly. The hope remains that Honda unlocks the missing power through software refinement. That deployment curves are optimized. That cooling stability improves with track evolution. If that happens, the 4-second headline shrinks dramatically. And the narrative changes. But if it does not, if Bahrain was not an outlier but an early warning, then Aston Martin faces a season of containment rather than contention. And that would transform one of the most anticipated projects on the grid into the most scrutinized. Right now, the AMR26 is not a finished weapon. It is a machine still searching for alignment. And until that alignment arrives, the dream of immediate championship relevance remains distant. Painfully distant.